Cuiv Galera Cordia August Tofoil to Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deal Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And I'm very honoured today to have the wonderful Meghann Scully. We look on you, Meghann, as a Limerick woman, but you were really born in Dublin, and you grew up in Spiddal, on Spiddale.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, first of all, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so it's funny because I've noticed lately a lot of people are referring to me as a Limerick person and saying, oh, you're from Limerick. And I've had an email saying, I know you're a proud Limerick woman. And I'm like, yeah. I am a proud Limerick woman. I was like, but where do I drop in that I'm actually not from Limerick?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was born in Dublin. I think I had the maybe the typical probably late 80s experience. Both parents were from Galway. They were actually from neighboring town and village in South Galway, and they did the kind of typical thing. Well, I think Dad possibly was living up in Galway, but he met Mum then, and they moved up to the capital, I suppose, and that's where Dad was working, and that's where they set up, I guess. And we would have spent the first 5 years of my life were in Dundrum. I know everyone knows it now because of the shopping centre, but back then it was real suburban Dublin, and all our neighbours were from the countryside. A lot of people from the west of Ireland that had done the typical thing of getting married and moving up to the capital. And we spent about, I was 5 years there. My brother was 2.5 years older, and my parents, their marriage didn't work out and didn't go to plan. So my mum found...
So sorry about that, Meghann. Yeah, it's terrible when that happens, but it really is. It really is.
It is, but I think upon reflection, and I think from a very young age, I realized that they weren't compatible as a husband and wife. Yeah. So I think when I realized that, it was much easier for me to accept it. And because of the separation, we got to go to Spiddal. So Mum was separated, I guess, with 2 small kids up in Dublin. All her family,
hard.
Yeah, really tough. And all her family are from Galway. And she said at the time she wanted to go back to Galway, but didn't want to move home, straight away, because she kind of said she felt like she wants to be close to family, but not too close. And she happened to have one friend at the time who lived in Spiddal, and she was on the phone to her one day, and Momo just said, "Come to Spiddal." And then Mum said, "You know what? Why not?" So that was it. We literally packed our bags, moved to Spiddal in Connemara, Gaeltacht area, not a bar of Irish between us. And
that's interesting. And for people who are watching this who aren't from Ireland or who don't have any Irish connections, on Spiddal would be Irish-speaking part of Ireland. And my mother was fluent Irish. I never picked it up because I came from England. Meghann, you were born in Dublin, brought up in Galway, now living in Limerick. What do you really consider yourself, or do you consider yourself a mixture, I suppose, of the three, because they have become the tapestry to your life, if you like. They have formed you as a person, all three counties.
They definitely have, but I actually do say to people, I say Galway girl and Limerick lady, because both places have been very influential in my life, and both places are so special to me. And to be honest, I think if I was to move out of Limerick again, it would probably be to Galway, unless there was some reason I was taken a further field. But Galway and Limerick,
interesting,
will always be the two. And there's I guess Galway's home, so home is always going to have that special place. But Limerick for me has been, not, I suppose I couldn't say more than a home, but it's just become such a community. Because if my mother heard me, she'd be like, "What are you saying? Home is Galway." But Limerick has become such a special place to me, and it's the people that make Limerick. And I think that's something that's always said when you ask anyone about Limerick, it's the people. I don't know if I've ever come across people that are just so friendly and so welcoming, and that actually really embrace, I just feel like since I've come to Limerick, I think if I do end up moving away, I think the Limerick people are going to be like, "Sorry now, where do you think you're going? You're one of us."
But it is interesting that Dublin hasn't played any part really in your, it doesn't seem to be in your passion, if you like. It doesn't seem to hold that place that you call home. I mean, I was born in London and I live here in Ireland. I've here since I was a child. But I always feel a pull as well to London as much as to Ireland, because all my family are there. And I was born there, and all my childhood memories and the happy memories are all, I have great happy memories here in Ireland, my childhood and everything, but I still have phenomenal happy memories from childhood as a spoiled only child in England. So that pull is there, but there's no pull for you in Dublin.
No,
really.
it's funny. And
Interesting.
I've lived in Dublin since. I was there back in must have been around 2015. Actually, I lived in London for a year and a half, and I came back from London to Dublin.
Yeah.
And I just found I didn't get that same sense of home that I get in Limerick and Galway. And actually, it's funny you say London. I only spent a year and a half living in London, but every time I go back, I feel like more of a draw to London than I do to Dublin.
Isn't it? It's I don't know what it is. It's just people say to me, oh, you can't feel the connection with two places, but you can. And it all comes back to the memories that you have. The childhood memories never go.
Yeah.
They're you can build memories later on, but the childhood memories, good or bad, are the ones that are the most significant because you're forming as an adult. But you studied Irish and new media in UL, and then you went on and you did a master's in journalism in NUI Galway. How was it natural that you were going to do Irish, given that you had suddenly got this love of the Irish language from on Spidale?
Yeah, it's a funny one. So I guess, as I said, we came to Spidale when I was 5, so I would have went into Ninon Bioga. Now I had started in Dublin, but Mum took us out, I think it was March of 95, we moved to on Spidale, and I guess, as I said, we had no Irish, but sure, when you're so young, we were like sponges. So, yeah, so we took it all in, and within no time, both Marcus and I were fluent. And I always loved the Irish language, and it was just, I guess, it's just we spoke every day, so it was natural. So when I moved then to my third national school, I moved. So then Mum ended up building a house in Ardrahan next door to Granny, so she ended up going home eventually. And I went to my third national school, and I remember being in the class and speaking Irish and reading, I would say, during the Irish homework. And I remember my classmates saying to me, why do you speak Irish like that? Well, you sound weird when you speak Irish, because I had the gloss and I was like the real connings as well. So because I was a new girl, I almost felt embarrassed. So I was saying, this is my third national school. I wanted to fit in. So I kind of actually dumbed down my Irish because I felt that I'd blend in better with my classmates. But
it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, because I was just I didn't want them to think that I was some kind of outsider. And then I remember our principal at the time, he was amazing, and he always encouraged my Irish. So, and he was always one to kind of bring it on. And then when I went to secondary school, I went to Seamount in Kinvara, and like that, I must have been reading out an Irish passage. And the teacher said, she looked up and she said, where are you from? And I was like, Ardrahan. And she goes, that's not that Irish is from, where's that Irish from? And I said, oh, I lived in Spidale for 5 years. And she was like, okay, interesting. And then she really, have to say, made sure that I was, like, she said to me, really. And she was like saying to me, she's like, you should be top of the class in Irish all the time. And I remember one time we all did this Gramadach quiz, and I have to say, Gramadach in Merla and in Gaeilge, I'm useless at. That was never my strong point. And I remember everyone failed it because it was just I think it was the Mo Cnealach agus Colour of the Marshin. So everyone was like, couldn't get the head nor tail of it. And of course I didn't either. And then I remember she kind of gave out to me, and she's like, you should be passing it. You should be like getting an A in this. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not good at grammar. So then I think from then on, every Irish teacher I had
grammar I hated. It's the Mo Cnealach and the Aimsha Kappa. And I had all nuns. I don't know if you had, Meghann, but the nuns I had for Irish, one of them, bless her, she used to go outside the door crying because she couldn't cope with the class. Just couldn't cope with the class. Yeah. She just wasn't set up for teaching. And I had visions of her outside the class and me going out trying to console her. But I never gripped the Irish like I did. And I just always wish I could take time out, maybe spend 6 months on the Aran Islands and just embrace the language, because it's a beautiful language and I'd love to be fluent in it.
It's absolutely stunning. And I think, and after that, from being in school, and then I think when I realized Irish was my strongest subject, I then wanted to impress my teachers, because I was like, well, I better show them. And it actually was a teacher I had then. So I went to 2 secondary schools, and my second secondary school, the teacher happened to have a friend who worked out in TG Cahir. So when we were in 5th year.
Geez, Meghann, you did the rounds with schools, 3 primary and 2 secondary.
And 2 universities. I know. I was like, and I promise I never got kicked out of one. I wasn't a bold kid. I was like, we just moved a lot, but I love change. I think that's why I adapt so well when I move, because I've been doing it all my life. But when I was remember that day, our teacher brought us all to TG Cahir as an Irish day trip, and sure, as soon as I stepped inside those studios in Ballynahown, I was like, I just felt at home. And I remember then my teacher knew that I wanted to work in media, and she knew that I obviously loved Irish. So she set me up with her friend then to go out and do some work shadowing a few days. So when we were having like holidays or midterms, I was heading out to TG Cahir to work shadow. And I just knew when I was there that I just loved it so much. And then I was like, right, I want to work in media. I want to continue with my Irish. But I also wanted to go to the University of Limerick from a very young age, because I have two aunts. I have two aunts that married two Limerick men, and they've been here for as long as I can remember. So I used to come down to visit them when I was in national school. And I remember the time my aunt bringing
two very sensible aunts.
Two very sensible aunts, exactly. And then my aunt brought me out to the University of Limerick campus. I think I possibly was only 11 or 12. And I remember walking around, and I just said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, but I want to go here. I was like, I have to go here. I was like, and I was really sporty as well. So the campus is just, I always say it, and I will still always stand by it. I think UL is the best campus in Ireland. And it's stunning. And I'm always trying to encourage all my cousins to go to UL. But
and I mean, I did my master's in Mary I and my PhD in DCU. And I still would say that Mary I and UL are two different, very different, and for different reasons. I love them both.
Yeah, they are.
Mary I is so small and so family oriented and feels so comfortable. And UL then just seems to have everything. It seems to embrace everything that you could possibly be into as a person.
It is, and you'll really find your own there, because there's so many different diversities and cultures, and there's, like if you're in something completely like unheard of, you'll find someone in UL that's also into that. And I really think you find your people when you're in UL, because you're in that environment of where everyone's kind of open to meeting new people as well. And it's really, it's such a huge community, and I just think the place is amazing. But when I first got handed the syllabus, then I was like, right, University of Limerick, that's all I'm looking at. And there I found on Gaelgogs na Manura, Irish and New Media Studies. And I genuinely was like, how is this happening? This is really crazy. Like, I was like, this is just
amazing,
like,
how things are destined. It's almost like your stars align.
And I think I've always kind of had that outlook in life. I think I've been, probably from a very young age, I've probably manifested a lot of things in my life without maybe meaning to, or without kind of actually sitting down to manifest. I think I've done that because I always wanted to go to UL, always want to study Irish, always want to study media. And lo and behold, there it is. And, I just,
right in front of you.
And I knew that, and I knew that was my destiny, and I knew that was my path. And I was like, that's it, I'm going to UL. And that's happened. That's how I ended up in UL studying Gaeilge.
And it was just obvious. I mean, everything was there. The media that you loved, that you were drawn towards, the Irish that you loved, in a college that you loved.
Yeah.
How difficult was it settling into Limerick? Some people say Limerick people are very clannish. I don't find that. I think Limerick people are very embracing. I think Limerick people are very eager to welcome the foreigner. Like, I would have probably considered myself the foreigner. My dad came to Ireland when I was 14. He didn't have a job here until I was 14. So, it was just once a year all I was seeing him. So I can associate, I suppose, a bit in the sense with you, Meghann, when you say your parents, the marriage broke up. Mine didn't, but I never saw my dad from only once a year. Yes. So they might as well have not been together for so long until they were, but I can understand that. But how well did you fit in immediately, or was it a challenge to actually settle into Limerick? Because it's safe to say it's not Spittle.
No, but do you know what? I think from all the moving and adapting and having to kind of always be the new girl, I'm always able to find friends. Like, you could send me off now somewhere on my own, and I even off to the shops or off somewhere, and I will always strike up conversation. And when I lived in London, people in work, the people I worked alongside me were like, I'd come in and I'm like, oh geez, I had this great conversation on the tube, and they were like, with who? And I was like, oh, this person that was sitting beside me, and they were like, you're not meant to talk to people on the tube. And I was like, hold on a second. I said, you think you're not meant to talk to people in the tube? I was like, I was like, some of the best conversations I have are with strangers. So I've always been that kind of person. But
that's the Irish in you, though. That is the Irish, because when my mom lived in England, she could not get over how she'd pass people in London. She'd say, good morning. And she said they'd look at her as if like, who is this crazy woman saluting me?
It's so funny, and I just think it's such a lovely thing. And I still, when I walk past someone, if I end up making eye contact with them, even when I walk around Limerick, I'll always kind of give a nod, because I'm like, that's just the way we were brought up. It's like, you kind of, and it's nice too, because you don't know what difference you could make to someone's day, because you've acknowledged them or said hello to them, or you might.
But you do see people looking back at you, kind of like, do I know her? Because you're saying good morning, hello, and they feel like they say hello, and they're saying to themselves, I don't know her, but I've said hello. It's just, yes, you never know how much that hello has meant to somebody who's maybe in a dark space.
Absolutely.
And I suppose we'll go on now. That is a great segue into your books. You wrote the book Broken Love, but you also wrote Little Pocket of Dreams, of Love, I should say, Little Pocket of Love first, wasn't it?
Sorry, Broken Love was my debut book. You can kind of see a poster there behind me of the book. I used to have one at hand. I've got them all packed away. I just do have one. 1 second now. Move my room around.
Broken Love.
This is my debut book, Broken Love, my journey through loss and grief. And I think, so I guess to give the story pretty much, my brother Marcus, my only sibling, died in a car crash when he was 18 and I was 15. And obviously that was completely life-changing for us as a family. And it was just probably the most difficult and harrowing time of our lives. And then to add to that, then in 2006, a year and a half later, my dad Maxie sadly passed away due to health complications. So I was 16 then. So at the age of 15 and 16, I lost the two most important men in my life that I guess kind of were, my dad was probably the first man I met that I was in love with. And then my brother was the second man I ever met that I was in love with. So the first two men I ever knew and loved were gone in the space of a year and a half. And I think, the men in your life kind of shape a lot of your relationships then going forward. They do,
Meghann, they do. And I find,
and they, like, to be fair, Marcus more so, because my parents were separated, would have had a bigger influence on my life. And he very much so was a father figure to me as well, because he was there all the time. And Marcus was like strict with me, but also, really protective, and then great fun as well. So we had a really great brother-sister balance, but then we also had like a father-daughter thing as well. So he was so much more than just a brother to me, and he was a huge influence on my life. So to have him taken away at probably the most influential time in my life, hormones, being a teenager, junior cert exams, like I was in an all-girls convent at the time. It was, there was a lot going on, and then to lose him and then to lose dad in such close succession, just
doesn't seem crippling. Like it's fair. Sure, it doesn't, Meghann.
No, and
it seems like it happened with my parents. My mom was diagnosed 4 days after my dad. She found my dad dead, and I was an only child and she was an only child. So the two most special people in your life, the two people your whole world is wrapped around, gone like that.
I know, and it does, and life seems so cruel. And I obviously went through so much of the why me, like why did I deserve, like why did I deserve this? Did I do something wrong along the way? I had all those questions going on, and it took years and years to kind of realize that okay, it actually wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. I think that's a huge thing in the grieving process. We take on a lot of blame and guilt on ourselves, but we just have to realize that unfortunately sometimes life is destined in a certain way and we've no control over it. But the book then, when Marcus, I've been writing in diaries since as far back as I probably could write. I think the first time I wrote my name was on my mother's good cushion up in Dublin in the house. And but I think we still have the cushions because they were so good that they lasted a lifetime. But I was
wasn't going to part of them.
Yeah, so constantly writing, constantly doodling. And then it was when I guess Marcus died that suddenly my writing took a different course, and suddenly I felt I couldn't express my grief because I had a mother who was absolutely torn to shreds. My mother just cried and cried and cried. Non-stop, like middle of the night, she'd wake up and she'd cry in the morning. Like she was constantly crying. So I thought, I can't look at her like this and be as upset as her. I can't even cry in front of her. So I decided to bottle my grief and look after my mother. And, that's what my brother did when my dad left. Marcus looked after mum and I. So, mum was really upset at the time the marriage broke down. And it was probably Marcus and I that took care of her.
She had to live for you. She had to live for the two of you. She had to go on. It's funny you should say that, Meghann, but that's so true, because when I came home that day, when I found out my mother was sick, there's no way I could let her cry about my dad. I wanted her to stop crying about my dad because I felt it was upsetting her, and therefore it was upsetting me. And I couldn't cope with her sickness if we were to try and think of dad as well.
Yeah.
It was almost like you had compartmentalized that grief because you're trying to cope with this one.
Absolutely. And when you're trying to mind a parent, it's just, you know, emotionally as well as I guess it's physically as well and mentally, there's you're taking on so much because you're almost as well, you're trying to like I felt like I was always trying to take the grief away from mum and trying to like, because I felt I was so strong and I was able to bottle my grief, and I felt I could disguise it so well that I thought if I can take on some of her grief too, I'll be able to disguise that as well. And I think possibly I did that. I think I took on her grief, and I also took on dad's grief as well, because I suppose parents being separated, dad lived in the East Coast for many years, and like that we wouldn't have seen him that much when we were small kids. So I think he lost out in a lot of time with Marcus as a small child, but he did move to Galway in the like more recent years, so we got a few really good years together, so that was good. But I think maybe dad kind of, you know, his grief as well was completely different to mum's because they're both mourning the same son but a completely different relationship, and it was just a really difficult time for us. But I stayed fighting.
Did you find, Meghann, when you were grieving your dad's loss, the loss of your dad, say, on top of the loss of Marcus, that a lot of your grief with your dad was for what you had missed out on as much as what you had what you had lost, that you had known, the times that you hadn't spent with him as a child was all blocked away, and then that came to the fore suddenly when you were grieving the loss of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in recent years, I kind of noticed that there was a lot of grief that was unresolved from maybe even my parents breaking up that I had to deal with. And definitely in the last couple of years, once I was able to kind of move on from the death of Marcus and the death of dad, I found that there was issues from my childhood, from the breakup that were, and I guess maybe the having a dad maybe absent for a lot of my years definitely played a huge part in my journey in the past couple of years. So I literally spent the past year healing those wounds and learning to let go of what I didn't have and what I did have, but also learning then to appreciate the good times with dad. And like now I'm able to kind of park everything, and I'm being able to move on, and now I can look back on all my memories with my father, and the ones like my favorite memories are usually the kind of the most simplistic things we did together. So I often remember and reflect on those moments, and now I kind of just say, do you know what, I'm grateful that I even had those moments, because, you know, I'm sure something else could have happened in life in our earlier years that we might not have gotten those moments with dad. But like, I'm grateful that I did, because dad was meant to die when he was 21. He had a kidney transplant and he was given, I think, days to live. So the fact that we got him till he was 52, I think was amazing. And the fact that I got him till I was 16. So I am now grateful for those moments, and I've been able to let go of the 52
pain. Is no age. Sure, no. It isn't. My dad was 59.
Yeah, like the 50s are young now. That's
age,
young.
No age. And you know, and you think, what have I done? What have I done? Why me? Why is that as such a small family, which you had, there was just your mum, dad, you and Marcus, then suddenly you're left on your own.
Yeah, and I did it really,
you're an only child.
Yeah, suddenly. And I felt so alone at times too, because when our parents broke up, Marcus and I always had each other. So when things were bad or tough, or, you know, things weren't nice at home, Marcus and I always had each other, and we always knew that. But then when he died and then dad was gone, and mum was so upset, I felt so alone and so lonely, because, you know, I didn't have Marcus to share my grief with, because him I was grieving. And that was definitely a really difficult time, trying to navigate through his loss, dad's loss, trying to mind my mother, trying to get through my exams, move schools, you know, the hormones, like everything that comes with it at that age. It was just a really, really difficult time. And it was, at times I was absolutely sinking, but nobody knew, because I just concealed my grief so well. And I constantly had a smile on my face. And, you know, people, genuinely, everyone thought I was totally fine, because I looked it and I acted it. And I did not let anyone see my pain for quite a number of years.
At what stage, Meghann, did it all manifest for you that you needed to actually write this down, you know, and how cathartic, I suppose, did you find the process of writing? You know, I mean, I'm a writer, and I mean, I know the difficulty of that blank sheet of paper. God, I've faced it so many times, you know, and there's nothing worse than it when you're looking at a sheet and you just don't know where to start. Where do I start? What was the process for you?
It actually, the writing, see, I suppose I wrote at night time when I was in bed when mum was asleep, and finally I could
Yeah,
get some time on my own. And I actually found that was flooding the pages with words because I was trying, I'd internalized so much of my pain and loss that the only way I could get it out was by writing. So for writing for me was my savior. It's actually, I think, all I had for so many years. And I did fill pages, and I filled diary after diary after diary, and I was well able to write. Now I kept them all hidden, and it was just the most amazing process. And then when it came to publishing the book, I realized I gave myself quite a lot of years because I needed to kind of be on the like pretty much healed from my grief before I could share
yeah,
my story. And when it came to putting the book together, it actually was a case of going back through all my old diaries from since I was 15 years old. And that actually in itself, going back, reading all the pages and seeing how sad and how lonely and how much pain I was in was a huge moment for me, because then I was able to look at myself when I was writing the book saying, oh my God, look how far you've come. You've done it. You made it. Because back in 2011, when I graduated from UL and went to do my master's in journalism in NUI Galway, that was probably the most difficult, challenging and saddest and awful year of my life. I say awful, but actually probably the most enlightening year, because that's when I had to suddenly transform. And that's when I realized I really had to grieve because I buried so much of my grief. So that for me was a huge learning curve. And then I was able to go, and it was actually a couple of years after that then that I decided to write the book. So I remember lying on the floor in my student accommodation in Galway, and I was thinking, probably never going to make it in the media world. I was in such a bad way mentally that I just thought I'm going to have to, I actually did move home, and I was like, that's going to be me now for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to live at home with my
yeah,
mother. I'm probably going to have to be on medication for the rest of my life. I'm probably never going to enjoy the life that I had. And I remember thinking, actually kind of like accepting that. I remember thinking, okay, well, that's it now. You might as well throw away the masters. You're not going to pass it now. But it's when that time then when my mother came into me and she said, look, you're grieving. We need to do something about this. And that's when I took the first step to getting help, because, and it's also probably the first time that I realized I was grieving. I thought I'd lost my
yeah.
mind because things were just so
It's
chaotic in my
dreadful.
head.
It is.
Yeah,
It's
everything
dreadful.
was just so awful. And I couldn't actually see straight to realize that it was the grief that was causing all
Yeah,
that pain. But then
yeah,
when I
yeah.
did, and I started to like slowly go through it, I was able to pass my master's. I was able to graduate, and I was able to get on with my career eventually. Like it took my career path maybe took a little bit slow, like a little bit longer, and was a bit slower than other people who work in my industry. But, I was also battling years of grief that I had to go through before I could become I guess the broadcaster and author I am today. So like when I was writing the actual book, Broken Love, have it upside down. When I was writing Broken Love, as I said, I was going through those diaries, and I actually kind of sat back and was like, oh my God, you've actually come through. And like, if you told me back in 2011 when I was on that floor that I was going to be where I am today, I probably would have been like, absolutely not. There's no way that this girl is ever going to come of anything, because I genuinely felt completely defeated. But I think that's what the whole point of the book was, to show people that you can actually get through it, no matter how dark the days are, that you can actually get to the other side. And in fact, you can probably go on to live an even better and more fulfilling life. And that's kind of the message that I still try to portray today.
Yeah, sometimes it's almost like, I suppose, a kick in the backside to remind you that life is it's just hanging on a little thread. And
Absolutely.
like that, it can be gone. And the world that you know, and the only world you know, and the one that you're most happy in and contented in, and in my case, having everything done for you. I mean, I didn't have to do a thing. I came home from work. My costumes for Bunratty were hanging up, ready. My dinner was on the table. My breakfast was on the table every morning. I was really mollycoddled. And then you end up having to do everything on your own for the first time, and you have no yardstick to remind you or guide you, and you stumble in and you make so many mistakes, and you start to feel angry with yourself for making mistakes. But when you look back on it, those mistakes formed the person you are today. And I'm sure you made plenty of mistakes, Meghann, along the way, or you look back and said, why did I do that? Or why did I say this? Or why didn't I do this? But they might have taken you on a completely different path again. And, I think things are laid out for you. I'm sad to say, but when you looked up the UL program, and you saw media and or new media and Irish on it, your stars were aligning at that particular point. They may not have aligned earlier had you decided to go to college earlier or later. That was the moment in time that your path was set.
And I think as well, and that's why it's been very important to me with my journey through losing Marcus and Dad, was that as painful as a lesson that was, that also was probably that was the life that was laid out for Mum and I. And I think accepting that was actually a huge moment, and realizing that Marcus was only meant to be here for 18 years. And that was his life. And Dad was only meant to be here for 52 years. Like Dad probably shouldn't have even gotten that many years, but he did. And I think, it was being able to accept that not everyone's life is as long as we would love it to be. And I had to learn to let go of Marcus and let go of Dad. And I think we're talking about writing there. And I think, I always encourage everyone that's suffering. A lot of people message me quite a bit on my social media channels asking for advice and asking for help. And I always say to them, like, I'm obviously not a trained therapist or psychologist, and I always make sure that people know that, because I'm just a girl sharing her experience. But I think people, as I said, get kind of hope from me because they see how I'm getting on in my life. And I always say to them, get the pen and paper out. And they're like, I don't know what to write. I was like, you don't have to plan it. I said, just sit there and just see what comes out, because you might be surprised what will spill out onto the pen and paper. And it's the year later, or 2 years later, or 3 years later, when you read back over those old diaries, that's when you realize how far you've come, because we're very quick to punish ourselves and to kind of, put ourselves down. And I was so bad for not giving myself a break and giving myself a bit of a breather. And, in the past year, especially, I probably had one of the most transformational years of my life, because last year, Dad's anniversary, I was a complete shell. And I, at this stage, I'd like brought out my first book, was writing my second book. I've been publishing things and like different books, and my career was, going from strength to strength, but I was absolutely floored last year. And I remember thinking at Dad's anniversary, like, why am I still so emotional? I was like, it's years later, and I've dealt with all the grief, and I've gone to the counseling, and I've gone to the healers, and I've done all the work. But then that for me was kind of like a red flag to say something's still not right. So you need to stay digging. And I did. And I got myself a life coach. I went back to counseling. I went to some alternative healers as well. And I realized
that's interesting. How important do you think counselors are? I personally only went to one, and I walked out after about 5 minutes, but it took me a year to go, and my bosses in work, when I was in work, saying to me, oh, you need to go and see some, because I wasn't coming outside the door.
Yeah.
And it was pretty bad, 11 months, and I hadn't gone outside the door. And they were putting in these little notes in the door, and little pieces of paper with people's names on them from Milford Hospice and everything. And eventually I went, and it just wasn't for me at that, or she wasn't for me. But I hear so much positivity about the importance of going to a grief counselor and having somebody to speak to. How important was it for you?
It has been really important. And it's like, I remember talking to someone recently about this, but my mother sent us to child psychologists after our parents broke up. So I think maybe I've always kind of grown up in an environment where we were encouraged to speak to someone. And then Mum brought me to counselors after Marcus died. But to be honest, I think you have to need to and want to go yourself.
Want to go, yeah.
It's like people can bring you and walk you to the door and send you numbers and do everything for you, but until you're ready yourself. And for me, it was, I found out that I went to quite a lot over the years, and some of them I was like, can I just walk out of this room? I don't feel a connection. But what I did realize was that anytime I went to a male counselor, it was huge for me, because I had lost Marcus and Dad. So for me to be speaking to a man that was probably relatively close to my father's age, I was able to kind of have that connection of missing the men in my life. And for me, that was huge. That was huge for me. And I've said that to my friends who are looking to speak to someone. I was like, you have to find a person you connect with, because I said, you just you don't connect with everyone. But I remember having one particular male counselor, and he was just incredible. And I was able to speak to him. And, we did those sessions where they get you to speak to, imagine your father's here opposite you and you're speaking to him. So when I was doing that, I really felt like I could see my counselor as my father. And, that was for me, was a huge thing for me. And I know everyone goes on, does say, go to therapy, go to counseling. And it's not as easy as that. You have to want to go yourself, and you have to be in a place where you're ready. But that's the same when people message me on social media, and I kind of say writing can be a huge starting point, because as I said, you can get stuff on pen and paper, and then you also have a record of what's
Do you
in your head.
encourage people to keep diaries?
I think keeping a diary is so important. I just think to document your life. And I still write as much as I can. And I even document, like, if I go out for dinner with the girls, I put that in there, and I put in, it's literally like it's like so I know in years to come, I'll look back in these diaries and I'll have all these memories, or maybe when I'm old and my brain isn't functioning as well, I can
You're on a Zimmer frame.
Exactly. And I can read back and remember all these special moments, because for a long time I only wrote when I was sad or depressed, and I only wrote about the sad and the bad. And I didn't write. And then I was like, I need to start writing about the good stuff too, because you need to kind of get into, you need to kind of record the happy moments as well. So I try and encourage myself to write about the good things as well as the bad things. So now I can look back, and when I look back through all my diaries, I can see what way I was every single year, because I've it all written down. Because the problem was, when I was only writing the sad and bad stuff, it looked like nothing good was happening in those years between, when in actual fact, good stuff was always happening.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, my research was in childhood literature about childhood under Nazism. So when I look at the diaries and the letters that people wrote, the likes of Peter Ginns and the likes of Anne Frank and that, and the wealth of knowledge, or that the world has now, and the way you could see the children progressing as the months went and days, and sometimes you could see the depression in their writings, and you could see the happiness and the joy and the hope, and then the depression at feeling that life wasn't going the way or that they weren't going to live. So your whole life can be charted out through your diaries. I think they're very important. I've never managed to do them, and I regret it greatly.
Yeah, and I think it's just, and it's kind of a nice, a lot of people say, sitting down reading, and sometimes sitting down reading a book can be lovely. It's a bit of escapism, or it brings you away. But also when you're writing, you're kind of brought into another place as well, where you're on your own, and you kind of have that like moment to yourself. It's kind of what I call, like in my book as well, I have a chapter on me time, and I'm all about spending time with yourself. And when you're writing, that's just you and your thoughts, and there's nobody else around, and it's just something lovely to do, because I think people always say, oh, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. If you just sat down for 10 minutes and just started jotting down, you afterwards, like, you'll almost, like, I find after I write, I just feel this kind of nice feeling, because I've put maybe what's in my head out onto paper. And even of late, I found my brain sometimes can get very, I guess, like, old kind of patterns can start to creep in, of being anxious and starting to get panicked and stressed over something that I can't control. So I know in those moments, either I'm going to meditate on it, and I'm going to do a meditation and try, like, figure out what's going on, and then I'll write down what's in my head. And then suddenly, when I write down what my brain is going into overdrive about, then I write it down, and then I look back at it, I'm like, oh, actually that's actually not that's fine, because then I've released it in some way. I feel like when I've released it out into a pen and paper, I've let it go, and I'm able to rationalize, and suddenly I'm able to calm down, take a deep breath, and just get on with my day nice and calmly.
It might sound like a strange question, but when you look back again at Anne Frank, and she called her diary Kitty, so she humanized her diary. Her diary then subsequently wasn't an inanimate object; it was somebody that she was talking to. So because she didn't have the people around her, her family and her sister all around her, but they weren't people she could communicate with. She didn't really get on with them. They didn't understand her. She said Kitty understood her better than anybody. Yeah. So Kitty was the person she was writing to, and Kitty was the person that she thought would never betray her, unlike everyone else. But it's kind of ironic that years later, when her diary was found, Kitty became her betrayer, because everyone could actually read her innermost thoughts that she thought nobody would ever see. How much do you think your diary is? It might sound strange, but do you look on it as being a friend, or do you look at it as just being a diary, a blank paper on which you're going to transmit your very thoughts? Or do you have a personal relationship with your diary? Does that sound weird?
Yeah, no, that's really an unusual question. I think I've never really thought about it, but now that you asked me that, I guess my diary is always right beside my bed. Or if I'm going for a weekend away, or if I'm going, actually, I went on holidays a couple of weeks ago, brought my diary with me. And I just find when I am with my diary, I can be, I guess I am at one when maybe, I think my diary is me. So, and you're right, you are sharing your innermost, I guess, thoughts and things that like you don't want anyone to know. And I think though, if someone was to read my diary, they'd struggle to understand my writing, because I do write very fast and I don't write very clearly. But I think maybe in a way that if someone was to find it and pick it up, they probably would struggle to read it. So that's maybe without realizing I've done that. But yeah, it's I think my diary is me. I haven't given it a name. I often just refer to it as my Teelan, for obviously the Irish for diary. But I don't see it as my friend, or I don't see it as, but I do see it as maybe me. It's a piece of me that I have. And as said, mentioned there, like when you're sitting down writing, it's just, I feel like I'm brought to this. I don't know. I feel like I'm in this kind of bubble, or I'm brought to this like special place. The way reading a book can bring you to somewhere. My writing is my alone time, where it's just my diary and I love it.
But it's when you look at I suppose the diary of Peter Gint, when you said you wrote your writing so complicated for people to read, he created a cryptograph, so only he understood. And there's parts of his diary that his sister Chaya Pressburger can't determine what he was writing, because it was all in cryptography that he invented. He was only 13. And he was a journalist as well. He was going around Theresienstadt camp interviewing people and drawing, and one of his paintings was brought to the moon on the ill-fated space shuttle Columbia that crashed coming back into Earth. But, you know, he was a very creative person, but he invented, as I say, his own cryptography that he could write away and happily read back, and nobody knew what he was writing until he was ready to translate it into English for people to write. So it might be interesting for you to actually start creating your own form of cryptography.
Yeah, that could be my next venture. And I think as well, that's why, and like I know, because you know, some people say, would you not just type it into your computer? And I'm like, no, because that's technology. Like anyone can probably pick up your computer, and no one's computers are locked. You know, it's very easy to get into people's computers and phones.
And I just think it's not as physical either. It's not a physical relationship. It's not personal. There's not the personal between the hand and the paper.
That's the magic of writing. I think it's, and as I said, when people are saying, where do I start? I was like, you don't have to start. It's not like your homework. I was like, sometimes you just sit down with pen and paper, and like, sometimes I'm sitting here and I'm like, I feel like I need to write, don't know what I want to write. So I literally just open up the diary and then just start. And I always date it. I think that's just from school. I always date the day, and then I just go. And sometimes I might write a paragraph, sometimes I might write a page, sometimes I might write 5 pages. I just go with it. And if I feel like I need to get more out, I'll get more out. Now, some of it probably isn't going to win any sort of prizes for, anything original. Some of it's probably pure just mush that's in my head, but just sometimes getting it out really is like, it sometimes probably is as powerful as having a good sit down with a friend, or a good session with someone professional. Like, cause sometimes without like, you're in a way, I guess, sometimes verbalizing things can be quite difficult. And I found writing has always been so much easier a way for me to communicate.
And Frank found that too. She said she found it easier to write than to talk to, because people misunderstood her. But it's interesting. I interviewed a woman called Dr. Inga Auerbacher, and I was sending her, and she said, I don't type. I don't do anything electronic. Wow. So she said, what you've got to do is send me the questions. So I sent her the questions to America. She wrote out all the questions again, and then wrote all the answers. And she wrote her book by hand, the 4 letters to the witness of my childhood. And everything was by hand. And she used to send me these lovely little letters with love hearts on them, and envelopes with a secret envelope only open when you're happy, or when you need someone to talk to. And everything was personalized. And she said that there's a magic between the seat of the heart and the soul that only happens when you write, because you can leave these margins on the side, and people can see years later all the mistakes where you crossed out and what you had initially thought, and you cross it out, and then you maybe change the word to something else, but they can see the original thought that was crossed out and changed, and they can see the progress of the writer that they can't when it's typewritten, because on a computer you can delete what you don't want, and you can put in and you only see the final product. But with the handwritten word, you see the process of a writer like you, Meghann. If people see your writing, your handwritten notes, they'll see exactly what Meghann Scully was thinking, and you might have crossed it out and put in something else instead of it. But there's much more of a process, she felt, and much more of a human aspect to writing rather than to typing. She's 84.
But, it's so personal as well. It's and I think it's something beautiful that we can all do. And if you can take time at all to just write a few lines and just see where it takes you, because you don't know. You could, like, sometimes things come out of my pen that I didn't even realize that were bothering me, and suddenly I'm like, okay, so that's clearly something that's on my mind. Well, then that's something I need to work through. And why am I feeling like this, or why does that bother me now? And it's like, I personally love studying humans, and even my own mind. I've kind of almost been a case study for myself the past, couple of years, but definitely the last year, as I say, when I went through the most, I guess, transformative year, I was examining like a lot of things, going, why am I thinking like that? What's making me do this? How can I, solve this? And it's great now. And I feel like I've gotten such a great grasp of myself and the human mind. And I think definitely in years to come, I will probably go down some sort of psychology route. I'm not saying that I'll become a therapist, but I definitely want to pursue or study that more in depth over the years, because it's something that just fascinates
next year. I tried to sign up this year, but I just missed the deadline by a week. So I'm going to do counseling and psychotherapy.
I just think it's just so fascinating. I think it's, there's so many things going on in our brains that we probably, a lot of us mightn't even ever get as far as. And I just think it's to be like, I just find humans so incredible, and I just love learning. And I feel like I'll always be learning. I just love learning, and I love kind of, I guess, growth as well.
But see, people think that when you go to a counsellor and that you've got to talk, or that the counsellor has to answer you back, or to give you the advice or give you the answers. But most of the time, people just want someone to listen to them.
That's it.
They don't want anyone to even answer them. They would be quite happy if the person just fell asleep even inside, just that they had something like you have your diary to outpour all your feelings to. That's like a counsellor.
It is. It's to be heard. You want to be heard. But you just want to feel like someone's hearing you. And I think that probably is maybe how I look at my diary. When I'm writing to my diary hears me.
Tell me about your little pocket of love.
I have that here too. So I wanted to bring out
I like that little book. I think it's sweet.
It's tiny. So just to give an idea of size.
Both of them are beautifully done.
It's like the whole idea with this was I brought Broken Love all over everywhere I went with me. It was always in my handbag, because I like to take photos of it, maybe with iconic landmarks. Like, it's been beside Big Ben, it's been beside the London Eye. A friend got a picture in Sydney. It's been like and I encourage people abroad, if they have it, I was like, can you take a photo of it with, even if it's a sign? Just for me, it's special for me to see it. But one thing I found was Broken Love just didn't fit into
metaphorical as well, for that love and that peace and tranquility is spreading the globe.
Exactly. And grief is universal. So I wanted to bring out a second book, and my publisher at the time was saying, it's good to bring a book out kind of as soon as possible. So I was like, look, I'll let Broken Love do its thing. So then it was on literally New Year's Day, 2021, just gone. I brought this book out. I've been working on it for quite a while, but this one was a bit slower to do, because I wasn't really sure. I didn't want to write a follow-up to Broken Love, because it's too young to be doing that. But I wanted something that would speak to everyone, because Broken Love, you'll read Broken Love when you need to read Broken Love, because it's the kind of book everyone's going to grieve at different times in their lives. People are grieving at the moment that have the book and kind of can't like physically open it up yet. And I was like, don't worry, the book is going nowhere. It'll be there for you in 10, 20, 30, whatever amount of years. When you're ready, it'll be there. But and it kind of didn't resonate with everyone, because not everyone has, maybe there's people I know that haven't actually dealt with loss at all yet. So, and that's kind of the way the book is. So I want to bring out a book that would help everyone in different areas of life, be it anxiety or anything to do with mental health, be it with family, relationships, separation, divorce, so many different things that are going in our lives. But I also want to put in chapters about happiness and gratitude, and a book that you can just pick up and literally open up a page and just read. You'll see there's quotes inside.
Where can I get those books?
They're all online, and bookhubpublishing.com. That's the only place there at the moment.
Book Hub.
publishing.com. So, you know, and they're both doing really well. And like, I've got people telling me that they have little pocket of love beside their desk or beside their bed, and they just might either morning or even just read one page and then put the book away. And that's the whole point of it. They're there for you whenever you need them, whenever you want them. You don't have to read them. They're not time sensitive. They're, as I said, grief is universal. Grief is going to affect us all at different stages. And, you know, it's always,
and it mightn't be the conventional form of grieving for somebody who has died. It could be grieving for the loss of a relationship, or grieving for the loss of a pet.
Yeah,
which is, you know, very understated, the amount of grief one can actually go through when losing a pet. Sometimes people will actually say that it's, you know, they miss their dog more. I'm trying to think of his name. He's with Aslan, the singer with Christy Dignam. He said actually he missed his dog more than he missed his dad, and it wasn't that he didn't love his dad. He adored his dad. But he said the grief he experienced when he lost his dog was like no other grief, he said, he had ever experienced in his life. And as an animal lover, I can understand that. I can understand you become, they almost become your diary. They're the person, they're the being that you talk to whenever you're feeling down. And if you're in a bad mood, they know it instantly.
Yeah, I feel like my dog, and any pets I've had over the years, like I always feel like your pet is a part of you. They are literally, they are a part of you, and they actually know you better than you know yourself. Like I know when I'm at home, my dog and my cat actually as well, I have to say the cat's the same. They can completely read my mood, and they know, like my cat knows if I'm really anxious and I'm kind of bothered and I can't relax, my cat will sit on me on the sofa. And if I try even move, he will like gently claw me as if to say, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here and you're going to sit. And when I'm
until you can.
Yeah. And he's like, and I know he's doing it. Then I'm like, okay, I just have to relax. And then I know then he's like, when you're ready, I will get off you. And then after like, sometimes it could be an hour or two. And then suddenly he gets up and he's like, okay, I'm going to go now.
Go now.
And then by then
your purpose.
Yeah. And then by then I'm relaxed because I've chilled out and I've, you know, just completely I've been able to unwind. And then my dog is really high energy and we bounce off each other because Mam reckons Mam's like, she is you. She was like owner, like she's always laughing. She goes, the dog is cracked and hyper and always running around the place. And she goes, she's literally a dog version of you. So I was like, yeah, I think.
But Meghann, I suppose before we finish up, at what stage did you decide to do the little shows with the Limerick Post? Because they were good, very good.
Yeah, so I joined the Limerick Post just over 2 years ago now, and the whole idea was to kind of build the digital side of things because digital is obviously the way things are going now. Like we're here on Zoom, and so the Limerick Post show was born then, and it was kind of, I used to basically just go around Limerick interviewing people all around the place, and I went to so many events and I got to meet and know so many more people, and it was absolutely incredible. And then of course the pandemic hit and suddenly we had to move everything online, and now it's all been online, and it's been so difficult. But do you know what? The funny thing about it is I got to interview people then that weren't even in Limerick, that were from, that's what I find.
It opens the world to you.
Yeah.
That, you know, you might stay in your little world of going up and down to Limerick or going to a concert here or a show there or Arthur's Quay or wherever to interview people. You might never get past the people in Limerick, and fabulous as they are, you know, at least this gives you the option to talk to people all over the world. I mean, I've spoken to people from everywhere, every corner of the globe, Israel, Germany, France, America, Australia, Canada. I'd never have been able to speak to them if it hadn't been for Zoom.
It's been amazing, and I'm so lucky we have it, because I was able to, like during the height of lockdown, I think I was producing a video every single day, and because people were like, I have Zoom, can I talk to you? And now like we're starting to very slowly get back out there, and we're starting to kind of get back into real life. And what I've noticed now is people are really engaging in the videos that are coming out now, because, you know, I think people are seeing us go back out in real life, so more people are like, okay, now you can see, if you're looking at social media and you see that I'm now interviewing someone face to face, it's like, okay, things are actually starting to move in that direction. And I'm loving it, and I'm actually getting such a good energy off it, because I love conversing with people, and I guess it's my job as well. So it has been giving me, it's been great.
But it can be your job, it can be people's jobs, and you can clearly see people who are not cut out for the jobs that they're in. They're in it for whatever reason they're in it, but they don't really have the love of communicating so much. Whereas you can see with you that you do. I love communicating. I love talking to people. I love listening to people's stories. And but how difficult was COVID for you, given that, you know, you're still, I suppose, one is never out of the grief process. I think it's just different levels on the grief journey. And sometimes you can think you're just okay, and then suddenly something will just set you back again. Songs will set you back, smells will set you back, colors will set you back, or something that will trigger a memory in you, will bring you back to the point where you might have been at the very moment you found out that your father was dead, or your brother was dead. And when you're in COVID lockdown, I think all of this, personally, manifests itself threefold or tenfold for many people. How was it for you, Meghann?
To be honest, I think I was working probably 7 days a week. I had a very busy social life. I was playing tag rugby. It was nonstop for me in 2019, and I loved every minute of it. I really, really enjoyed it. But I guess 2020 put me sitting in my apartment on my own with nobody around, nowhere to go, nothing to do. And to be honest, I actually was like, you know what, I'm going to take this in my stride, because there's probably not going to be a time again in our lifetime where we will be able to sit at home and do nothing. So I made a decision. I was like, right, that's it. I'm just going to embrace this time. I'm going to get back into reading and writing, and back in, like, properly get into meditation again, you know, practicing more yoga, and just spending a lot more time reflecting. So at times I have to say it actually was great for me to get the break, because now it's made me realize that I don't want to work 7 days a week now going forward. I don't want to be running all around the place and driving here, there, and everywhere. I want to do the work and the roles that actually fulfill me and give me something in my life. And I've learned now from the year to say no to people and to things. And I think I'm now going to make my things that I love doing, I'm going to make them more of a priority now. And I think that's where it taught me to strike a good balance between work life. And that's what it's all about.
In some respects, I suppose it rebooted. It gave us a way to kind of look and say, well, you know, we're forced to calm down, forced to do nothing and think. And I suppose as creative people, and you would be creative, you're into journalism, and you're into creating, writing and things like that. You'll always find a way of passing the time. And you're an only child now, in the sense that, so you're used to your own company. But it's difficult for people with 4 and 5 and 6 brothers and maybe children who are used to noise and I'm not used to noise. And I have a friend, a colleague here in the station, who, when they call, they have to have the TV on or the radio on or noise, because he's one of 9.
Oh, wow.
And 9 brothers and sisters. And as an only child, I'm used to silence. I'm used to quiet and being able to occupy myself. So it wasn't really bad for me, COVID, because you and I could do these videos.
Yeah.
And it was almost like it's nothing different. I'm speaking to somebody, but it's not a replacement for the physicality of meeting people, sitting down and having a cup of coffee with your best friend.
That's it too. And I think, you know, and I was lucky throughout the lockdown. I had one friend, and actually it's funny, it's the girl I met my first day in first year in UL. My mother wouldn't let me live with friends. She said, if you're going down there, she goes, you're moving on campus, you're living in student accommodation, and you're living with strangers. So I was like, okay, fine. And the first girl I met when I walked in the door was Hanya, and we've both ended up back in Limerick again after all those years. And it's just been fascinating, because we would have been obviously housemates in first year. We would have drifted then after that, because we would have moved into different housing estates with different friends. And then we have now come full circle, and we're both back living in Limerick, and we were each other's bubble for lockdown, because at the time we were both alone, because my housemates moved home for all of lockdown, and you know, we were both then pretty much living alone. So we spent a lot of our time together, and it was amazing, because it meant we had each other to go for walks with. We did a lot of takeaway coffees, we did a lot of takeaways, and then we also then had our own space to go home to, so we weren't trying to work around each other. We actually were, our apartments were like, we had our apartments, but then we could spend time together and then also spend time apart. So without each other, I think we would have, I definitely would have struggled. And, you know, I found having someone to, like, as you said, the physicality is so important. And I think that's,
So
and
important.
I feel like bad saying like, oh, I enjoyed my lockdown, because I know so many people really did struggle out there. But I think, you know, as I said earlier, I think, you know, my worst year mentally for me in 2011, 2012, while it was the worst time of my life, it ended up being probably the most important time of my life, because it made me seek the help that I needed, and it made me get off that cold floor, and it put me into the on the path that I'm on now. So I think for people who did struggle during the year, you know that maybe now is the time to reassess, reevaluate, and refocus, and maybe see where you want to take your life, where you want to go with your life, and so that maybe, if you know, if you're ever in a situation again where you are on your own, that you now will be able to cope with it, and that you'll be able to make the most of it. So I think you know, I often empathize with people who had a really tough time during the year, and I think, you know, things are starting to move in the right direction now, and I think we're seeing a different type of community now. People, as you know, we're doing things now that we actually want to do. We're doing things we want to love. We're seeing the people we really want to see, and we're making,
and
you know,
people realize they can work from home just as much as they can work from the office. But that, to be honest with you, I think you need to actually get out and go to an office. But what's next now for Meghann Scully? I mean, are you going to be a writer or a journalist, or an amalgamation of both?
Well, it's funny, I kind of manifested again, and the stars aligned, and I said I'd give myself the summer to stay going as I was going, but I'd said by the end of August, I want something, that'll be my time then to kind of, you know, kickstart the things again, and kind of really take on new challenges on top of my existing work. But I have a special something coming out with Virgin Media. It should be announced, I think, in the next few days, and that's going to be happening for the next couple of months. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm going to be doing actually a little bit of work with TG Caher as well. So it's never a dull moment. And then the writing will always be there. I think I'll always be a writer no matter what.
Well, you're a writer at heart, and writing can be done in the comfort of your downtime.
Yeah, it is brilliant.
Do you know so? And but Meghann Scully, thank you so much for being my guest today. It was exceptionally interesting, and a joy to listen to you, actually, and to listen to your story. Sad though it is, I mean, it's a wonderful journey that you've made from grief to where you are now, and how you've navigated it in your own way. And it's individual. Everyone will have their own way of navigating it, but that's your way. And and as you said, you're not a psychologist just yet, just somebody that wants to help people.
Exactly. And thank you so much for having me, Mary. And as I said, I just want to be able to hopefully give hope to people that are struggling right now. If you're in the depths of grief and you think that there's no, you know, I suppose the old cliche thing, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but there actually is. And I just hope that anyone who is in a bad place today know that you can get yourself to the place that you want to be. You just have to be a bit patient. And it's something that I've learned over the last years. Patience is something I definitely didn't have. And yeah, it's something that I'm still trying to come to terms with.
We're all going to, we're all can be accused of that. I mean, I think I'm an incredibly patient person, but there are times when I want everything yesterday.
Yeah.
The only child breaks out in me, and I want it yesterday.
You understand?
I have to have it yesterday. And when I want something, I'll die until I actually get it. One way or another, I get it. I'm stubborn like that.
Stubbornness as well, yeah.
Shindera leis an clár. That's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, the Coon of Day. Bhualam tugalir chia kana sanas agus bra. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. Agus gadeshiv slán. Slán, Meghann.
Slán agus gurmíle mágat.
Nábare.